Hi everyone, I'm Spiro here with a special announcement from Newsbud. We are very excited to announce Newsbud has produced our first documentary film titled General MacArthur's Conspiracy to Start a War with China.
I believe that we must try to limit the war to Korea. To make sure that the precious lives of our fighting men are not wasted. And to prevent a third world war.
It has been said in effect that I was a warmonger. Nothing could be further from the truth.
A number of events have made it evident that General MacArthur did not agree with that policy. I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy.
We were not to talk about this. We were not to talk about it to other people off the ship, nor among ourselves. We would be subject to both fines and imprisonment if we did not abide by this.
While no man in his right mind would advocate sending our ground forces into continental China, we can dominate with sea and air power every Asiatic port from Vladivostok to Singapore.
Uncover one of the most important secret chapters of U.S. history, now available on Amazon and Newsbud.com. Joining me to tell us more about this is the man who wrote, narrated, and directed the film, producer of Newsbud's China Watch, Peter Lee. Now, Peter, welcome and congratulations on producing a fantastic documentary film. This film contains a bit of everything, from secret missions to espionage and a massive conspiracy to start a war. In your own words, Peter, can you tell us about the topic of your documentary?
Yeah, thanks, Spiro. The topic of the documentary is a secret mission that was put together by Douglas MacArthur at the height of the Korean War in an effort to spark a wider war between the United States and China. MacArthur was dissatisfied with military operations being restricted to the Korean Peninsula, and he decided to do something about it.
So what inspired you to produce this documentary, Peter?
That's a good question, Spiro. I was researching a piece I was doing for Newsbud on the origins of the Korean War, and while I was doing that, I was looking into the relief of Douglas MacArthur. He was relieved from command of UN Forces Korea in April of 1951, and I found a very interesting reference on Wikipedia concerning an operation that he had green-lighted to try to spark a wider war with China. And you know, you're not supposed to pay attention or cite Wikipedia as a sole source, so I immediately went and checked the standard biographies of MacArthur, and there was absolutely nothing in them about the MacArthur mission. And that sent me on a search through the internet and then through Korean War veterans groups, and I was able to come into contact with people who had been participants in this secret mission, and they were able to give me the backstory on it, and it's a really unknown secret chapter of the U.S. history of the 20th century, which these veterans have been able to bring to light.
Peter, can you tell us more about who was in the film and what role did they play in these events of the secret mission?
Well, one of my key sources was a Navy veteran. During the Korean War, Tracy Winslow served on the USS John A. Bole as the main propulsion officer with the rank of lieutenant junior grade, and later as the engineer officer with the rank of lieutenant.
The destroyer John A. Bole arrived in Korean waters in early November of 1950, joining Task Force 77.
And the John A. Bole was at the center of the MacArthur conspiracy to spark the wider war. I was able to track down Tracy, and Tracy graciously agreed to appear in the documentary. He's also an amateur historian, and he has spent years digging into the background of the mission. Well, he was on the Bole, and for decades afterwards, he didn't pursue the issue because it was classified. But then after the mission was declassified in the 1990s, he pursued it avidly, and I'm very happy that we're able to share his recollections and also his findings in the documentary.
What were some of the challenges that you faced while producing this documentary?
Since this mission had been classified and it had not been the subject of formal historical inquiry, there was a lot of digging that needed to be done, both in the archives of the U.S. State Department and also the archives of the British Foreign Office in London. And so I had to track down those documents in order to document the various claims that were being made about the mission of the John A. Bole and the context for MacArthur's project to widen the war with China.
So, Peter, in your opinion, what makes this film unique and special? Why should people tune into this?
Well, I think that the mission of the John A. Bole is one of the most important secret chapters in the history of the United States in the 20th century. It represented a major inflection point in American security policy in Asia, and it's one that has been virtually unreported. And it's especially relevant to bring it to light now when the United States is deeply engaged in Asia, deeply committed to confronting China, and also, of course, experiencing a new crisis over the Korean Peninsula. One thing that had been buried for a long time was the opinion of a lot of China hawks that MacArthur was right, and 1951 was the time to widen the war into China, to confront the People's Republic of China and bring down the Chinese Communist Party. There are people in the Pentagon today who have a similar mindset. Feeling is that we're now at an inflection point or approaching one, and within 10 years, if we don't do something about China, we're not going to be able to withstand them militarily, and the United States will have to cede leadership in Asia to the People's Republic of China. So there are people who think like MacArthur, and the only question is, are there people still in the U.S. government who can stop them like MacArthur was stopped by Truman in 1951?
Peter, you pretty much answered my next question, which was going to be, tell us, how does this film and the historical events that happened back in 1951 relate to today's events and what's going on? And it certainly appears that it does. So if you had to list some key words to describe the film, what would they be?
Well, the key words, a lot of them are already in the title. Douglas MacArthur, Korean War, conspiracy to widen the war with the People's Republic of China, the USS John A. Bole, which is the destroyer that was at the center of the MacArthur conspiracy, and, World War III, because we were coming close to World War III with the MacArthur provocation. At the time, there was real concern that if the U.S. was successful in involving China in an Asian theater war, that the Soviet Union would intervene on the side of the Chinese, and that not only meant in China, but also attacking the U.S. bases in Japan.
It really was a great film, Peter. Obviously I wasn't around in the 50s, and so a lot of this information was new to me, and I had no idea. And being that this information was classified and there was a secret mission that took place, even people on board of the ship were sworn to secrecy and threatened with arrest if they even spoke about the events that took place that day. So I'm so glad that you shed some light on this and exposed this. I'm really looking forward to actually watching it again in depth. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I got a couple, actually. I'd, of course, love for people to buy the documentary, stream the documentary, watch the documentary. There's one other thing I'd like to reiterate, that is that this was an enormous operation. MacArthur sent the USS John A. Bole down to provoke China, but the John A. Bole was part of a task force of 14 ships. There were thousands of men, officers throughout the chain of command, and civilians in Japan and Washington who were involved in this operation and had knowledge of it. And that's just the American side. There are also people on the British and Chinese sides who I think have recollections to share. So at the end of the film, we ask both direct participants and friends and family members to contact us to share their stories about the 1951 incident that involved the John A. Bole. And Newsbud has set up a special email address for people to contact us and tell us their stories. And if we can get these stories, I just want to emphasize that all these communications will be kept confidential and will not be shared or referenced without prior written permission from the people who send them in.
Peter, one final question. Why has it taken over 60 years for this story to come out?
A few reasons, I think, Spiro. First, of course, the mission was classified, and many of the participants felt duty-bound to keep the secrets even long after the mission had been completed. And even after the mission was declassified, it presented special problems for historians because one of the characteristics of the mission was that from the first, it involved falsified records. For instance, on the John A. Bole, it had been prearranged that the deck logs that recorded the position and movements of the ship would be falsified, and there was no accurate record of what actually occurred. Second reason, I think, is more of a political reason. For the sake of civilian control of the military, it was really not desirable to advertise that MacArthur had abused or perhaps exploited his command authority to the extent that he was able to send 14 ships to the Taiwan Strait to gin up a China war. Thirdly, certainly many officers in the U.S. Asian Fleet were involved. I would also not be surprised if, in addition, the Joint Chiefs of Staff knew what was going on and either condoned it or looked the other way. Exposing this operation would have damaged or dented a lot of important careers in the U.S. military and in the U.S. government, and I don't think that there was any incentive to really dig to the bottom of this. So the story remained very simple. MacArthur was insubordinate. He got relieved for insubordination. Everything else was bygones, and everybody went on their way. But now, finally, we are getting a more complete story of what happened in 1951 and why MacArthur had to be relieved. In a final note, I'd also like to express my special thanks to the veterans of the John A. Bole, in particular the chief propulsion officer on the Bole in 1951, for his recollections and his work in digging out the story. I'd also like to thank Sam Stock, who was the surface radar operator in the Combat Intelligence Center of the Bole and provided critical testimony, which is also in the DVD. And the John A. Bole Association of Veterans has also been very cooperative and very generous with their time and their photos in assisting the preparation of the documentary.
Join Newsbud and crew members from the USS Bole as they uncover one of the most important secret chapters of U.S. history: the conspiracy, the cover-up, and the covert mission led by a rogue U.S. general to start a war with China. This one-of-a-kind documentary film is now available to stream on Amazon, or secure your DVD today at newsbud.com.